laws. Reserved full citizenship rights for those of German or related blood, restricted Jews' economic activity, and criminalized new marriages and sexual relationships between Jews and non-Jewish Germans. 61. Jews were defined as those with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents. Many of those with partial Jewish descent were classified as mischlinch, with varying rights. 62. The regime also sought to segregate Jews with a view to their ultimate disappearance from the country. 59. Jewish students were gradually forced out of the school system. Some municipalities enacted restrictions governing where Jews were allowed to live or conduct business. 63. In 1938 and 1939, Jews were barred from additional occupations, and their businesses were expropriated to force them out of the economy. 61. A building that has been ransacked with debris strewn around. View of the old synagogue Einchen after its destruction during Kristallnacht. Anti-Jewish violence, largely locally organized by members of Nazi Party institutions, took primarily non-lethal forms from 1933 to 1939. 64. Jewish stores, especially in rural areas, were often boycotted or vandalized. 65. As a result of local and popular pressure, many small towns became entirely free of Jews, and as many as a third of Jewish businesses may have been forced to close. 66. Anti-Jewish violence was even worse in areas annexed by Nazi Germany. 67. On 10 November 1938, the Nazis organized Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, a nationwide pogrom. Over 7,500 Jewish shops, out of 9,000, were looted, more than 1,000 synagogues were damaged or destroyed. 68. At least 90 Jews were murdered. 69. And as many as 30,000 Jewish men were arrested. 70. 71. Although many were released within weeks. 72. German Jews were levied a special tax that raised more than 1 billion Reichsmarks, RM. 73. A. The Nazi government wanted to force all Jews to leave Germany. 76. At the end of 1939, most Jews who could emigrate had already done so, those who remained behind were disproportionately elderly, poor, or female and could not obtain a visa. 77. The plurality, around 110,000, left for the United States, while smaller numbers emigrated to South America, Shanghai, Mandatory Palestine, and South Africa. 78. Germany collected emigration taxes of nearly 1 billion RMA, mostly from Jews. 79. The policy of forced emigration continued into 1940. 80. Besides Germany, a significant number of other European countries abandoned democracy for some kind of authoritarian or fascist rule. 37. Many countries, including Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia, passed anti-Semitic legislation in the 1930s and 1940s. 81. In October 1938, Germany deported many Polish Jews in response to a Polish law that enabled the revocation of citizenship for Polish Jews living abroad. 82. 83. Start of World War II. A large crowd of people with swastika banners. Danzigers rallying for Hitler, shortly after the Free Cities annexation into Germanic German Wehrmacht, armed forces, invaded Poland on 1 September 1939. Triggering declarations of war from the United Kingdom and France. 84. During the 5 weeks of fighting, as many as 16,000 civilians, hostages, and prisoners of war may have been shot by the German invaders. Winking sad smiley. 85. There was also a great deal of looting. 86. Special units known as Einsatzgruppen followed Thermi to eliminate any possible resistance. 87. Around 50,000 Polish and Polish Jewish leaders and intellectuals were arrested or executed. 88, 89. The Auschwitz concentration camp was established to hold those members of the Polish intelligentsia not killed in the purges. 90. Around 400,000 Poles were expelled from Warthy land in western Poland to the General Governorate occupation zone from 1939 to 1941, and the area was resettled by ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe. 91. The rest of Poland was occupied by the Soviet Union, which invaded Poland from the east on 17 September pursuant to the German-Soviet Pact. 92. The Soviet Union deported hundreds of thousands of Polish citizens to the Soviet interior, including as many as 260,000 Jews who largely survived. 93, 94. Although most Jews were not communists, some accepted positions in the Soviet administration, contributing to a pre-existing perception among many non-Jews that Soviet rule was a Jewish conspiracy. 95. In 1940, Germany invaded much of Western Europe including the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Denmark and Norway. 84. In 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia and Greece. 84. Some of these new holdings were fully or partially annexed into Germany while others were placed under civilian or military rule. 85. The war provided cover for the murder of around 70,000 institutionalized Germans with mental or physical disabilities at specialized killing centers using poison gas. 91, 96, 97. The victims included all 4,000 to 5,000 institutionalized Jews. 98. Despite efforts to maintain secrecy, knowledge of the killings leaked out and Hitler ordered a halt to the centralized killing program in August 1941. 99, 100, 101. Decentralized killings via denial of medical care, starvation, and poisoning caused an additional 120,000 deaths by the end of the year. 100, 102. Many of the same personnel and technologies were later used for the mass murder of Jews. 103, 104. Ghettoization and resettlement. People and buildings with an unpaved street. Unpaved street in the Frystop Ghetto, Krakow district. People walking on a paved surface around a still body. A body lying in the street of the Warsaw Ghetto in the General Governorate. Germany gained control of 1.7 million Jews in Poland. 57, 105. The Nazis tried to concentrate Jews in the Lublin district of the General Governorate. 45,000 Jews were deported by November and left to fend for themselves, causing many deaths. 106. Deportation stopped in early 1940 due to the opposition of Hans Frank, the leader of the General Governorate, who did not want his fiefdom to become a dumping ground for unwanted Jews. 107, 108. After the conquest of France, the Nazis considered deporting Jews to French Madagascar, but this proved impossible. 109, 110. The Nazis planned that harsh conditions in these areas would kill many Jews. 109, 108. During the invasion, synagogues were burned and thousands of Jews fled or were expelled into the Soviet occupation zone. 111. Various anti-Jewish regulations were soon issued. In October 1939, adult Jews in the General Governorate were required to perform first labor. 112. In November 1939, they were ordered to wear white armbands. 113. Laws decreed the seizure of most Jewish property and the takeover of Jewish-owned businesses. When Jews were forced into ghettos, they lost their homes and belongings. 112. The first Nazi ghettos were established in the Wartheland and General Governorate in 1939 and 1940 on the initiative of local German administrators. 114, 115. The largest ghettos, such as Warsaw and Lodz, were established in existing residential neighborhoods and closed by fences or walls. In many smaller ghettos, Jews were forced into poor neighborhoods but with no fence. 116. Forced labor programs provided subsistence to many ghetto inhabitants, and in some cases protected them from deportation. Workshops and factories were operated inside some ghettos, while in other cases Jews left the ghetto to work outside it. 117. Because ghettos were not segregated by sex, some family life continued. 118. A Jewish community leadership, Judenrat, exercised some authority and tried to sustain the Jewish community while following German demands. As a survival strategy, many tried to make the ghettos useful to the occupiers as a labor reserve. 119. 120. Jews in Western Europe were not forced into ghettos but faced discriminatory laws and confiscation of property. 121, 122, 123. Rape and sexual exploitation of Jewish and non-Jewish women in Eastern Europe was common. 124. Invasion of the Soviet Union. Germany and its allies Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Italy invaded the Soviet Union on 22 June 1941. 125, 108. Although the war was launched more for strategic than ideological reasons. 126. What Hitler saw as an apocalyptic battle against the forces of Jewish Bolshevism. 127. Was to be carried out as a war of extermination with complete disregard for the laws and customs of war. 128, 129. A quick victory was expected. 130, and was planned to be followed a massive demographic engineering project to remove 31 million people and replace them with German settlers. 131. To increase the speed of conquest, the Germans planned to feed their army by looting, exporting additional food to Germany, and to terrorize the local inhabitants with preventative killings. 132, 133. The Germans foresaw that the invasion would cause a food shortfall and planned the mass starvation of Soviet cities and some rural areas. 134, 135. 136. Although festivation policy was less successful than planners hoped. 137. The residents of some cities, particularly in Ukraine, and besieged Leningrad, as well as the Jewish ghettos, endured human-made famine, during which millions of people died of starvation. 138, 139. Public execution of Masha Bruskina, a Belarusian Jew who helped Soviet prisoners escape. Soviet prisoners of war in the custody of the German army were intended to die in large numbers. 60%, 3.3 million people died, primarily of starvation. 140, 141, making them the second largest group of victims of Nazi mass killing after European Jews. 142, 143. Jewish prisoners of war and commissars were systematically executed. 144, 145. About 1 million civilians were killed by the Nazis during anti-partisan warfare, including more than 300,000 in Belarus. 146, 147. From 1942 onwards, the Germans and their allies targeted villages suspected of supporting partisans, burning them and killing or expelling the inhabitants. 148. During these operations, nearby small ghettos were liquidated and their inhabitants shot. 149. By 1943, anti-partisan operations aimed for the depopulation of large areas of Belarus. 150, 151. Jews and those unfit for work were typically shot on the spot with others deported. 149, 152, although most of those killed were not Jews. 147, 150. Anti-partisan warfare often led to deaths of Jews. 153. Mass shootings of Jews. The systematic murder of Jews began in the Soviet Union. 155. During the invasion, many Jews were conscripted into the Red Army. Out of 10 or 15